if we start. And Paula and Lindsay are here tonight from the Aquilino Cancer Center, which is on Shady Grove's campus in Rockville, Maryland. They are both social workers and amazing people. And I'm so thrilled to have you guys here with us tonight to talk about talking to kids about cancer. It's such an important topic and one that I don't think gets enough attention. So I'm gonna have you both introduce yourselves and just a big welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Stephanie, for having us. We both are also very passionate about kids whose family members have cancer because, as you said, it is a little bit of a population that doesn't get as much attention as we would hope that it does. So before we get started, we are here to support you and answer your questions. So we like this to be very interactive. Don't feel like you're being rude if you interrupt us and have a question about a slide or something pops up. You can put it in the chat if you don't want to be identified. There's also reaction buttons that you can use on Zoom. And so if you put your hand up, then we'll know to pause to hear your question. So feel free to jump in with us. Obviously, I'm talking quite a bit, so I'll start with the introductions. I have been working at Aquilino Cancer Center now for just over a year. Before that, I was working in Annapolis at the Wellness House of Annapolis, working with kids whose family had cancer and doing child programs there to help them cope through a diagnosis and beyond. And then prior to my work with children, with parents and family members with cancer, I was working in child protection services and doing trauma interviews with children that had experienced abuse and neglect. So there's a lot of different techniques that we use when we're talking to kids, and I've had a nice time learning how to ask different questions and support kids through different emotional traumas. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask them. And then I'm presenting with Lindsay today, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Wise. I am the social worker here at Aquilino. I've been an oncology social worker now for over 12 years. I've been here at Aquilino for 7 years and worked previously at MD Anderson and at University of Colorado Hospital. So working with all different populations in terms of types of cancer and families. And I've also done the CLIMB program, which was in Colorado, and MD Anderson, which Paula also did, which stands for Children's Lives Include Moments of Bravery. And it's a nationwide support group for kids and families who are dealing with cancer. So I'm just happy to be here.
So I will start by getting our slides up and ready for everyone. Okay, we're good to go, right? Okay. So this is where we'll start our recording, just so everyone knows. We do like to just put out there that anything that you do share, even over the recording, we want to try and keep confidential. And please don't share anything that you've listened to before or during this conversation that's somebody else's story. And it's for informational purposes only. We just did introductions, but you get to see our nice headshots there. So today's topic, we're going to go through how to keep yourself grounded before having this conversation with kids. Should we tell our children healthy conversations and an open dialogue? And I just want to preface this by saying I know that there's some grandparents on here, and maybe even you're talking with kids that aren't your direct children and you're a caregiver in a different fashion. That's totally okay. Lindsay and I have experience with all of that. Many of our examples, though, please don't be offended if we just say mom or dad. That's just how we've done a lot of work is with moms and dads. So, but it all applies to everyone.
Thank you, Paula. So we just wanted to take some time before we dive into how or why to talk to kids, that it's really important to take time to process your own emotions. No matter where you're at, if you're newly diagnosed, in the middle of treatment, switching treatment, whatever it may be, take the time to process your own emotions. It's really important to gather the basics first. Oftentimes I have patients that are calling me right when they're diagnosed, and I often recommend saying, well, why don't you wait until you have a little bit more information or a treatment plan in place so that you can have all the basics before you can start to have the conversation. And then really seek out your own support system. So build your own support team. And it may be helpful to share this diagnosis with a trusted, partner, family friend, not only for your own support, but also they can kind of help tag team when talking and involving your children. So I often hear that this conversation wants to be avoided because of some challenges and fears around the conversation. So first, there may be just difficulty with our own emotions that we have. This is a scary and overwhelming time. How could I, even put this on my kids? There's also the fear of the unknown. What if I don't have all the answers? So I don't want to say anything because I don't know all the answers. But one of the biggest fears that parents have is hearing the question, are you going to die? So lots of times the conversation is completely avoided because they're so worried about what if this question comes up and how will I handle it? And always we want to shelter our children from any unpleasant or, painful experiences if we can. So why put this worry or burden on them, if we wouldn't have to? So these fears and challenges often stop people from having that conversation.
And I just wanted to add it there with that, are you going to die? Lindsay and I help families kind of craft verbiage around that question. So if that is something that you're struggling with or your children have asked and you're not quite sure how to answer it, we can definitely go through and kind of help you with some verbiage with that.
So the next question you may be asking yourself, should I even tell my children? But it is important to talk to your children about your cancer because this cancer does not just impact you, it impacts the whole family in some capacity. Routines may change. There will be changes within the family. And research shows that children who are not told at all or told too late have higher levels of anxiety. And most importantly, telling your child really creates a sense of trust with the family. If you don't tell them, kids are very smart and they may find out on their own. And once that trust is broken, it's very hard to kind of come back to that. So, making sure that you're really setting up a very trusting, open environment for your children so that it allows them shows them that they can talk about it. So now we'll go into a couple of tips of having the conversation. But we want to first start by saying, you are the expert when it comes to your children. We're going to go over tips, some research, some education, some things that other families have found helpful, but you know your child best at the end of the day. And every family has their own, style of communication. So it's important to use your own style or, communication within your family. Try not to compare what other families are doing. Do what works best for you and your family. And it's really important to consider the temperament of your children, the personality, their age, level of comprehension, and really tailoring these conversations based on their age and developmental understanding. So where do we start? So the first thing is to create a safe space. And you can do that by just setting time aside to have this conversation, this initial conversation. So it may not be helpful to have at the beginning of the day when everybody's rushing to get out the door, or even sometimes at the end of the day when people are tired and, don't really want to talk. So figure out a time that's most convenient where everyone can have that dedicated space to sit down and have the conversation. And make sure that everybody going into this knows that there are no silly questions, that all questions are welcome, so that they know that they can ask any questions when starting the conversation. And really honor each person's emotions. Oftentimes patients ask me, is it okay to cry in front of my kid? I don't want to cry. But crying is actually a healthy outlet. Now, if you're wailing and you can't get any words out, that's a different story. But, crying is a healthy, coping mechanism. And we can model that for our children by saying, mommy is feeling a little bit sad, and identifying that. So it is okay. And it's okay if they cry. And just making sure that there's no right or wrong way to feel when having this conversation. And the second thing is really using the word cancer. And it really helps, the kids understand that what they're dealing with and what your family's dealing with. So we try to say avoid things like just grandpa is sick, because that sick can mean so many different things. So using this clear language really helps allow children to feel safe to use it again and to continue to talk about it. And always be open and honest, and avoid things that you cannot guarantee. You don't have to share every bit of information the moment you get it, and we'll talk about that later on. But just be, saying the words, I don't know, that's okay to say. But just having that open and honest and trusting environment is so important when having this conversation. So where do we start? What do I tell my kids? And we want to start by saying that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You may be having these conversations multiple times. Treatments change. Things change. So just because you have it once doesn't mean that it won't happen again. This will be an ongoing conversation that we have. But we started the basics to how to start the conversation. So we call it the 5 C's of cancer. So the first is, it's called cancer. So name where the cancer is located, what part of the body, again, using age appropriate language. Explain to them that this is something that you can't catch. This is really important, especially in COVID days, that this is not necessarily something that they can catch. They can still hug mommy, daddy, grandma, grandpa. It's okay. And that explain to them that there's nothing that they've done to cause it. So depending on where they're at developmentally, they may think, oh, well, I didn't listen to mommy and now she has it, just really explaining that there's nothing that they did to cause it and that they can't control it. But, that there's, the doctors are in charge of helping control it. And lastly, make sure to explain to them that they can still have fun, that mommy or daddy or grandma, grandpa, we want you to still have fun. We want you to be a kid. Even if we're not feeling very well, that doesn't mean you can't go out and smile and have fun. So those are just the 5 C's of cancer that we recommend kind of starting that initial conversation. And then let them know, that they will be taken care of. They will always have somebody, picking them up at soccer or school, or they will always have dinner, just reminding them that they will still be taken care of. And try to stick to routines as much as possible. And if you're needing help with that, make sure to utilize that support system that I talked about at the beginning. And then you can open up for questions. Ask them, what do you want to know about cancer? Are you worried about anything specific? How do you want to be involved? Lots of times kids want to be involved. How do you want to hear the news about the cancer? Do you want mommy to let her know every time we're going to the doctor, or, and give them a little bit of sense of control, but also you can kind of get a sense of where they're at with understanding cancer and if you need to explain it more.
So I just wanted to take a pause here and kind of ask if you don't mind sharing in the chat, how many of you have already started this conversation with the kiddos in your life? Okay.
I definitely have never talked to my grandchildren about it. I know when I was initially diagnosed, my daughter talked to her children, but I have not. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. It sounds like we have people on both sides of the sharing. Some of us have, some of us have not. This is what we call ages and stages. So Lindsay just went over the 5 C's, and we kind of take that as a framework for how to talk to kids. And then we tailor that conversation to their ages and stages and what they can understand. So with our infants and toddlers, of course, they can't understand the words that we're using, but under 2 and up to 2, that's when they're forming their attachments. And that's when it's really important that we make sure that we are continuing to provide them love and security. So the way that we can do that with toddlers and infants is making sure that we're hugging them, touching them, spending time with them, tucking them into bed. That's really important because even babies can sense when something's off. So making sure that we provide that, that touch to them. And then small children, the 3 to 5-year-olds, that age range is just beginning to understand their world. So they do have some vocabulary that they can use, and they have big feelings coming out of those tiny little bodies, as many of you know, and they're trying to express those emotions. So they're developing their understanding of the world through play and through doing. With this age range, when we're doing the 5 C's, we want to use like small words. It's cancer, yes, and who has it? Grandpa, grandma, mom, dad, and anybody else. And then you can use play to kind of maybe show them on a stuffed animal or a doll, very basic conversations with them. And then school age children, this is the 6 to 9-year-old. So this is when the kids think everything is all about them. Everything is because of their behaviors and things that they've caused. So back to what Lindsay was saying about make sure that they know they couldn't cause cancer. That is really important for that school age. They're beginning to develop their own sense of independence and parting ways with spending time with family or caregivers and always in their lap. They're in a constant state of learning. So they really do want to know what cancer is, how does it work. This is where you're going to hear all the whys. And we want to make sure that we're answering those whys with some sort of questions. I know that they can definitely be exhausting. There are some really good resources out there to help. There is an app that I like. It's called How to Talk to Kids. It's made by an Australian cancer center. And it actually, you can go through the app and it'll show you like a social worker, a doctor, a radiologist, a counselor, and the doctors and stuff get to tell the kids what they do and how they help. So that age range can soak in all that information. And they have come to learn about emotions, and they're still trying to develop them and learn how to express them. So they easily are worried and angry, and you might see them pouting more. That's just a way of them trying to develop and mirror empathy for you. And then we have our youth and teens. So youth are discovering who they are. When we say youth, that's around 10 to 14 years of age. They have their own thoughts, which I'm sure that anyone with a youth knows, and their emotions are a roller coaster. They're up and down, they change often. They have a very black and white thinking, a love and hate relationship. This is where we really want to take time to ask them what they know about cancer and then correct any thing wrong, especially if they've maybe had a friend that had cancer, or possibly you guys have had cancer in your family with somebody else, making sure that they know that, nope, this is our diagnosis now, this is how we're treating it now. That's going to be really important for them to know exactly how things are going to the best extent possible. And then teens, they're beginning to stable out with their emotions, but anybody that has teens on here might disagree with me about the stable emotions. They do have a sense of self, and they're beginning to kind of go into the gray areas of life and really discover how situations can go right and left, and they really want to seek information and have conversations about it. So that's a really good age where you can direct them to reliable resources, make sure that you're giving them the websites to look for, the specific diagnosis, things that you're going to try, and being a little bit more open and honest with how you're feeling, because they do have the empathy for that at that point. And ages and stages. So the language that we're using with them is really important as well. So again, with the infants and toddlers, even though they can't understand our words, making sure that we're providing reassurance through the hugs, touches, and even I love yous, I'm here for you. They don't know what those words mean yet, but it's really important to still continue to talk to babies and toddlers. For small children, use simple 3 to 5 word sentences if you can. Daddy has cancer here in the body. And one thing that I like to use with this age range with the play is like telling them about cancer, because they might not understand it. So I use Lego play a lot. If you get Lego blocks, you can just build them up nicely and kind of explain to them, you know, this is how our bodies work. They usually, the cells stack like this, and it works well together, and we can build something. When we have cancer, and you can turn the blocks over so they don't stack, and kind of describe to them that the blocks don't fit together anymore. So things like that, things like using the bears or stuffed animals to explain where it's at or where it hurts are really helpful to help them visualize that. They're also very attached at this age for the small children, so make sure that you're reassuring them that you're going to be there for them. Somebody's going to be there for them. They're going to get their needs met. For the school aged, be honest and specific. The Kids Guide to Cancer is the app I was just telling you about to help them better understand. There's also a really great video that MD Anderson put out where it's kids talking to kids about cancer and about these big questions that we had. So that's really nice if your family likes to communicate through like electronic learning. You can go through that video together and kind of pause it and see what questions your kids might have that are different from those kids in the video. And then for youth and teens, again, most of them have a basic understanding. Really watch the researching and the technology in the home at this time. They're also starting to internalize thoughts and emotions. So this is really the age range where it's really important to encourage them to share with a trusted adult. And we say trusted adult here because they do have empathy at this age. And so the youth and teens, they may not feel comfortable going to the person that has cancer and asking them questions or talking about their sadness or anger or whatever emotion it is with that person, because they know that that person is already going through a lot with the diagnosis. So if you're able to connect your child with a trusted adult that they can talk to that's outside of the person with cancer, that can be really helpful. One thing that I like to tell my parents that have kids in this age range is let them know that as mothers, parents, grandparents, we either worry about them or we can worry with them. So let us know what you're worrying about so we can worry together. That kind of shows them that it's a two-way conversation and we can be open and honest together. So make a plan for ongoing communication that involves your child. So as we said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. These conversations are going to come up on the ride to school. They're going to come up at Sunday dinner, just all over the place. Anytime they hear something out in the community, they might bring it back to you. So it's really important to make sure that everyone's on the same page as a family for how information will be shared, what information will be shared, and how often. So with some of the older kids, you can ask them, like, do you want to know every time that I go into the doctor? Would you rather just know if something changes? And then really helping them with language around how to tell friends, teachers, or other people that are important to them. Think about who needs to know. So is it helpful for teachers and school staff, maybe counselors, to know that something's happening so that they can let you know if they're seeing changes in your child? But also, we like to say, don't tell your kid to keep this a secret. If there are certain people that you don't want to know about this, it's important to let the child know, okay, mommy or daddy has to be the person that tells X person. It can cause a lot of anxiety if they feel like they have such a big life event that now they have to keep a secret. So make sure that they know how this information is going to come out to others as well. And as all of you know from having children, they like to say the darndest things. So we want to make sure that that's also something that's helping you. You don't want your child just saying something like, Dad has cancer, in the middle of a work meeting where it might not be appropriate and you haven't disclosed that to others. So making sure that they know when and who to disclose to is very important.
Yeah, and I think telling the school is really important if you feel comfortable with it, because it is an extra set of eyes and ears on your child. You know, you may not see in the home that things may be different, but there might be subtle changes that are happening in the school. So giving them a heads up, this is what's happened, and really utilizing that support with the counselors, because sometimes they can just do kind of routine check-ins with your child. So I just wanted to talk about the importance of telling the school if you all feel comfortable, because it is a really good source of support.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you have to disclose everything, the diagnosis and everything that's going on, but just letting them know that something's happening in the family and you'd like extra eyes or support for your kids. So ongoing communication, I always say that these years in your life with cancer are going to pass for you, but they're also going to pass for your child, and your child has to have their story in there. So we want to make sure that they're being involved. So for each kid, that can be different ways that they get involved. Maybe older ones are going to help out more with chores so that, you know, you're not so stressed with everything that you need to do around the house. Maybe for that school age, the art is really therapeutic for them. So you can have them get well cards for the person that has cancer, maybe even like draw out their emotions, how they're feeling that day. For the little ones, maybe giving that person extra snuggles as their way of helping. So just different ways that you can involve your child and make sure that they have a voice throughout this time. Some creative ideas that we have seen work really well for families when they've had either a lack of communication or a difficult communication. That sometimes happens with like maybe kids that don't want to share their emotions, are a few of these ideas. So pass a notebook method. This is a method where you get like a notebook, and it's a special notebook where parents or caregivers answer questions from the kids. So the kids will write a note in there, and the note can be anything like, I want to know how your scan went today, but maybe they don't want to ask you that right away, or they're too nervous to ask it to you, so they can write it in the notebook. And then the family that I was working with, the sign was if the notebook was open, then that meant that there was nothing to read. If it was closed, then it meant that it's time for you to read, the parents to read. So the parents would come read it and then answer the question on the next page. So that's really helpful. Also, if there's some big emotions, like I'm really mad that maybe I don't get to do soccer this semester because we have too many doctor's appointments to go to. Being able to just get that out and verbalize that is really important. And then it also gives you time to process. If there is like a big question that you don't know, it gives you time to process without having to be put on the spot to answer questions. And then the cuddle blankets. This is a really nice way that I've found for parents to kind of reassure their kid that they're always going to get those snuggles. So I've seen this done a couple different ways. One way is the kids make a special blanket out of fabric you get from the fabric store, and that's what mom or dad took to their chemo appointments. So the kids got to give them the cuddle blanket for their chemo. And then I've also seen it the reverse way, when mom or dad are in the hospital or getting treatment, the kids had the special blanket that they could hug when they were missing mom or dad. And then creating like a safe space check-in. So like having Friday night ice cream where everyone gets to have a little bit of sweetness, but also we can have that talk that's really important. It kind of gives you something to look forward to, not only from the sweet tooth, but also making sure that you have a set space where we know that we can ask any questions. And then a few of those, Lindsay, I'll let you talk to that you've done with your families.
So one thing is a strong box, because oftentimes it's really difficult for children to say out loud what they're worried about. So this is kind of a strong box activity where you can go to Michael's and get, it looks like a treasure chest. And the kids can decorate the outside of the treasure chest of things that make them strong, whether it's, I've seen, children put vegetables on it because that's what makes them strong too, family. So whatever they think that makes them strong. And then they can write down what they're worried about and put it in the box, and then, lock it up or seal it up until they're ready to talk about it, or until it's no longer a concern. So, one time, for example, I had a kid write that he was worried about his mom losing his hair. So he put that in the worry box, and then it happened. And then that worry went away because it wasn't as scary as they thought it was going to be. So they took it out and they ripped it up. So it's just something that you can use throughout, the time. It doesn't need to come out right away, but it's just a good way for kids just to write down their worries. And then feeling bracelets. So this is something we actually did at MD Anderson with our families. We had created different colors associated with a feeling. So, purple would be mad, yellow would be happy. So if the kids didn't actually feel about talking about it, they could put on the bracelet. So it could be they're, communicating, I'm feeling really sad today, but I don't necessarily want to talk about. So it's just a different way to communicate how they're feeling. So those were just two examples. And you can go again to Michael's and get some of these and do them on your own with the kids.
Or even Amazon boxes and shoe boxes work great for the strong boxes too.
We've done something before with my mother-in-law who was sick, where she had a special pillowcase, and then the kids had the same pillowcase, and so it was similar to the cuddle blanket, but it was then they could hug the pillow, and it was like they were hugging their grandma, even though she was living in a different place and stuff like that. And so that was just a way that they could still feel connected and supportive of her when she wasn't feeling well.
Oh, I love that. So it was everyone got matching pillowcases with grandma?
Yeah, so both my son and my daughter, and then my grandma, sorry, their grandma, my mother.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah,
I love hearing the creative ways that families communicate. Okay, so really normalizing their feelings. We've talked a lot about talk to them. So now you've talked to them, and now you're going to start getting some little emotions, some big emotions, maybe no emotion. is showing. But it's important to normalize all of those feelings. It's okay to be upset and angry, worried, and sad. And I just want to let the parents know that haven't communicated to their kids yet. It's also common for kids to not have a major reaction when you hear the news. And so I've heard from parents like, well, they don't care. They didn't say anything, they don't care, which isn't totally the truth. Sometimes when we hear things as adults, we can have a reaction right away. But for kids, sometimes they have to process it and it'll come out a few days later, or even weeks later when they've had time to figure out some of their emotions behind it. And you might just hear questions over emotions. It might just be oh, how did you get cancer? What is cancer? Why? How are you going to get treated? What happens next? What's for dinner tonight? Who's picking you up from school tomorrow? That's very common. Kids do like to redirect in stressful situations. So it's okay to answer those questions and kind of redirect them back to why we're having this conversation. And then most importantly, from all the babies to the grown adults and your adult children, encourage them to share their emotions. It's really important that we don't bottle everything up, and it's going to make your children stronger and more resilient to be able to go through these diagnoses with you and learn how to manage their emotions. It'll take them very far in life. So now that we see all these emotions coming out, another thing that parents have expressed to us is, how do we know if our kid needs additional support? Do I know if they didn't say anything, they don't care? Is that a sign that something's wrong, or is it something else? So again, this kind of goes back to, you know your children best. So everything that you're seeing on the screen here, it could be something that's totally normal for your child, and it's their day-to-day way that they communicate with you. But the biggest thing here is looking for something that's changed with your child. So for toddlers and small children, you might see that they become more clingy. They want to hold on to you all the time. They want you to hold them all the time. They don't want to go to bed on their own. They can't be comforted when you are holding them. For the toddlers, they're regressing in potty training or sleeping. And then really, again, with the small children, they're acting everything out, playing everything out. So keep an eye out for what they're acting out, because that could be a sign that you might need to have a conversation with them about something specific. For school age changes in maturity, so if they start to act younger or play baby a lot, that might be a sign to look out for. Changes in school performance. So this is again where Lindsay was saying maybe it might be good to let the school know. Maybe they were a straight A student and now all of a sudden they're not turning in their work. You don't want a full semester to go by before you realize that they went from an A to an F. So make sure that you're keeping in communication. And changes in mood. If you typically have a kid that's kind of mild temper and then all of a sudden they're crying more or having angry outbursts, the physical hitting, that's something that we see in kids a lot. They just don't know how to get an emotion out, so they might become more physical. In the youth, this is really where you want to start looking for the kind of going inward. If they start to go inward, they're daydreaming, they're not really seeming like they're all there, so to speak. And the last one here, admitting to or thinking of hurting him or herself. I just want to say that that's really important. I know that's a scary question to ask as a parent because we don't even want to hear the responses sometimes, but unless we know, we can't help our kids. So if you start to see things like your child withdrawing, it's okay to ask those hard questions. And that also shows them that they can ask you hard questions back. And then teens, if they're isolating, they're not participating in activities that they once enjoyed, or they're beginning to engage in any risky behaviors. I even think of this, a lot of the kids are on the games now. So if they're even withdrawing from some of those social groups, that's something that's really important to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and lots of families, providing that just, it doesn't, just making sure that it's like you have the initial conversation and just figure out a way that works for you and your family in terms of checking in, whether it's you checking in or another family member, but just, hey, just checking in to see how you're feeling this week. Or, I know we had a tough conversation. How are you feeling about it? And just doing those frequent check-ins just to see where they're at and if they're needing any additional support.
And our one reminder that we will say, always, 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 remember to have fun and don't forget, cancer is a big part of your life. That's a big part of daily living, but finding time to spend together as a family that's cancer-free can help build that relationship as a family and give your kids just time to be a kid. I think that cancer-free days are one of the best things that our families have done for each other, like even just going out for a picnic and maybe having like, okay, nobody gets to say the word cancer today. We don't get to talk about treatment today, just completely removing it so we can have a little bit of a vacation can be really healthy as long as it's not happening every day and we're avoiding the conversation together. So finding that right balance for you and your family. And then continue to remind your child that they can be happy and cheerful even when life is hard. They're resilient little ones, and we want to keep encouraging them to be resilient. It also is important to make sure that they're not feeling guilty about having fun. While you might not be able to play with them or be with them, if you're not feeling well, it's okay for them to still do the things that they love. So here are just some resources that we have for you. We are social workers, so I think that Stephanie, Lindsay, and I can all say we definitely recommend to seek out counseling support for you, as a family, or for your children. A few places that you can check. The school is always a good place to start. If you have school-age children, they typically have counselors or social workers available to students that are pretty well versed in all sorts of matters, so you can get a little extra support from the school. Check with your pediatrician or general practitioner, or you can do a search on Psychology Today for insurance-based services. And then your place of worship, that's also a great place to check, because a lot of times they'll also have a counselor on staff that's based in the religion that you follow. So that's a great place to check out as well. For books, there are actually a ton of books that help families through diagnosis. And the great thing about most of them are they've been written by children or parents that have already gone through this. So the 4 that you see up on the screen now actually have been written by people that have been through the experience before. So Lindsay's favorite is Mommy's Garden. I'll let her talk about that one.
Yeah, so this is a book kind of geared towards younger kids, like 5 to 8. But they explain cancer like weeds growing in a garden. And sometimes you have to pull them out, which is kind of similar to surgery. Sometimes you have to spray things on it that makes the other, healthy, pretty flowers, die. And that's helps explain when mom loses her hair. So I just love how they explain it. And what I love the most about this book, it actually doesn't have any faces. So there's no emotion attached to how they're explaining it. There's no sad faces or happy faces. They're just blank, which I really love because it helps the kids. It doesn't guide them that they should be feeling sad at this time because this is what the picture shows. So that's one of my favorite books, and it's actually by a local author. So.
And then The Invisible String is one of the ones that I really like. This one teaches children that even though we can't see things and like things in the body and love, those are invisible strings that we have for each other. And that kind of teaches them the the coping mechanism of being able to trust and have faith when we can't see things. And then what happens when someone I love has cancer, kind of goes through the cancer experiences of school-age children and child rather. And then when your parent has cancer, guide routines as kind of some of those more practical things we talked about, like diagnosis, treatment, what's typical, even though there's nothing typical in any person's journey, but that kind of helps at a team level. And then we did talk about with teens, it's really important to make sure that you're giving them reliable resources. So American Cancer Society, you guys probably all know that already, but that and the National Institute of Health are kind of like the most reputable resources that you can go to. They both have specific diagnosis resource booklets. So that could be something that you can share with the teens. And then cancercare.org/publications, they have tons of little guide booklets. They are wonderful. So they're very helpful for you as well as for your kids. And then the app and the video that we talked about in the presentation are linked here for you. And then for local groups, anybody that's close to Virginia, living in Virginia, or able to do virtual, INOVA or Life with Cancer, they have parenting through diagnosis, a teens group, and a children's group. Those are all 3 support groups.
Paula, would it be possible to put the MD Anderson kid-to-kid video in the chat, because we can't get the link from the video and from the slides?
Yeah, are you able
we'll
to send
share
out the slide
this.
deck?
Yeah. No, we'll share. We'll share it with them. So I guess then, yeah, it's
Perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'll get that after I exit out of this, but that's all of the presentation that we have for you today. So we'd love to kind of just hear from you, that any of those points resonate. Does it feel like something that, for those of you that have started the conversation, is helpful, or there's other things that you'd like to know, or for the parents that haven't started the conversation, are we missing anything that you were wondering about?
And before anybody answers, we will stop the recording. Let's just stop it now.